The saloon door swung open with a crash that silenced the room. Rain poured through the entrance, carried by wind that howled like wounded wolves. The man who stepped inside wore a long coat, darkened by water, his hat dripping shadows across a face lined with old scars and older sorrows. At his hip hung a revolver that had ended more conversations than it had started. Thomas Cade hadn't come to Redemption Creek looking for trouble, but trouble had a way of finding men like him. He'd ridden 3 days through storm and dust, chasing rumors of the McAllister gang. What he found instead was a different kind of darkness. The drunk man stumbled forward, dragging a girl of perhaps 9 years behind him. Her dress was threadbare, her feet bare and muddy. She moved with the mechanical obedience of someone who'd learned that resistance only brought pain. Her father, if that word could even apply to such a creature, thrust her toward the card table where 3 men sat with whiskey and cruel smiles. "She's deaf. Take her," he shouted, his words slurring together. "Can't hear nothing, won't cause no trouble. If you just need enough for another bottle, hell, take her for free if you throw in a hand of cards." The girl's eyes were downcast, fixed on the filthy floorboards. Her small hands trembled at her sides. Thomas saw the bruises on her arms, the hollow look of a child who'd stopped hoping for rescue long ago. One of the men at the table, a fat merchant with gold rings on his fingers, leaned forward with interest. "Deaf, you say? Might be useful for kitchen work. Won't hear the mistress complaining." His laugh was like gravel scraping bone. Thomas felt something ancient and cold settle in his chest. The same feeling he'd had when he'd found his own sister too late, years ago, in a mining camp much like this one. He'd buried that rage for a decade, but it never really died. It just waited. He crossed the room in 4 strides. His hand didn't go to his gun. Instead, it closed around the drunk man's wrists with crushing force. "Let her go." The father's bloodshot eyes struggled to focus. "Who the hell are you? This ain't your business, stranger." "I'm making it my business." Thomas's voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of iron. He released the man's wrist and turned to the girl. Her eyes were still down, her body rigid with fear. He knelt slowly, making himself smaller, less threatening. The room watched in tense silence. The merchant's hand drifted toward a concealed weapon. The bartender ducked behind the counter. Thomas looked at the girl's face, at the intelligence hiding behind that mask of learned helplessness, and he made a gamble. He'd grown up with a deaf cousin, learned the shapes and rhythms of silent speech. He lifted his hands and signed 3 simple words, his movements deliberate and clear. "I help you." The girl's head snapped up. Her eyes, brown as creek stones and twice as hard, met his for the first time. Shock rippled across her features. For 3 heartbeats she simply stared. Then with hands that moved like frightened birds, she signed back, "Please." That single word contained universes of desperation. Thomas stood, placing himself between the girl and her father. "How much does he owe you?" he asked the bartender. $43, came the nervous reply. Thomas counted out 50 silver dollars from a worn leather pouch, each coin ringing against the bar with finality. It covers his debt and buys his silence about what happens next. He turned to face the drunk. "You have 2 choices. Walk out that door and never come back, or I put you in the ground beside your conscience." Assuming you ever had one. The father's face twisted with impotent rage. But even through his stupor, he recognized death when it stared back at him. He stumbled toward the door, pausing only to spit and curse. "She's cursed, that girl. Mark my words, stranger, you'll regret this." "I've regretted better men than you," Thomas replied. When the doors swung shut, he turned back to the girl. She was watching him with eyes that had seen too much and trusted too little. He signed slowly. "My name, Thomas. You safe now. What your name?" Her hands moved with sudden grace. Sarah, he repeated aloud, then signed. "You hungry?" She nodded, and for the first time, the ghost of something like hope flickered across her face. Over the next weeks, as Thomas tracked the McAllister gang through 3 territories, Sarah rode beside him. He taught her to fish, to start fires, to laugh at his terrible cooking. She taught him that silence could be comfortable, that words weren't the only way to say thank you or I trust you or you gave me back my life. She wasn't actually deaf. She confessed one night by firelight, her hands moving in the darkness. Her father had convinced the world she was, found it easier to sell damaged goods than take responsibility for a daughter. She'd learned to survive by playing the role he'd written for her. "But you heard me that first day." Thomas signed the saloon. "I whispered." Sarah smiled, a real smile that transformed her entire face. Her hands danced. "You saw me, really saw me. First time anyone had in years." That was louder than any whisper. 3 months later, Thomas delivered Sarah to a schoolhouse in Santa Fe, run by nuns who knew sign language and accepted children others had discarded. As she walked through those doors, she turned back once, signed something quickly, then disappeared inside. The Mother Superior approached Thomas with kind eyes. "What did she say to you?" Thomas cleared his throat, surprised by the weight pressing against his chest. "She said thank you for teaching me I was worth saving." He rode away as the sun set, his shadow stretching long behind him. Some men saved the world with grand gestures. Thomas Cade had saved one girl. He figured that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.